How are you celebrating the 4th of July? Are you feeling independent?
No, not so much. This is day 4, diaper off, potty training
for your child, not yourself.
For my child, not
yourself.
for me.
Affirmative action. This ruling directly affects people in your position.
I'm glad that the ruling went the way that it did. Unfuckable hate nerds.
Is this an Asian thing?
This is not. This is a white people thing. I would be mad how corporate pride has become. And now how contentious for no reason.
Not even corporate. It's just kink. It's just gross.
It's gross. Yeah. How should we change the system in a way that would be fairer?
Just remember, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
In the culture war, there are no winners, just podcasters. Only a few are willing to risk their lives in the face of some of the dumbest ideas to have ever captured human civilization. Every week, I, Megan Daum, and Sarah Hayter humbly accept this mission in order to bring you conversations that are equal parts stunning, brave, and unhinged. Welcome to A Special Place in Hell. Happy 4th of July, Sarah.
Yes, happy 4th. We are recording on the 4th, although it will be released in a couple of days.
Yeah, but it's still 4th of July week. It's going to be celebrated all week, just as Pride Month is going to continue to be celebrated all summer, even though it is over, which I'm celebrating personally. I had lunch with a couple of lesbians the other day, and we practically toasted to the end of Pride Month.
Yeah. I can imagine. I would be really irritated. If I was like an elder gay, I would be.
Yeah, they were elder gays.
I would be mad at what's happening and how corporate pride has become, and now how contentious for no reason.
Not even corporate. It's just kink. It's just gross.
It's gross. Yeah. It's not about whatever it was in the beginning. It's about something else now, and yeah, hard to put your weight, but hard to support still, I think.
Well, it's just you feel misrepresented. So you wouldn't want to. Yeah. Anyway, so how are you celebrating the 4th of July? Are you feeling independent?
No, not so much. This is day 4 of diaper off, potty training.
For your child, not yourself.
For my child, not
yourself.
For me.
Okay.
Well, for me and for my child.
Because I think that that is a category of pride, I believe, is the diaper off, people. Diaper on. So
adult baby diaper lovers.
Yeah.
I believe they're called.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So this is not an adult baby. This is a baby.
This is a baby. Yeah. And there's this method. It's supposed to be a 3-day method, where you just take the diaper off and you let them run around in like a short shirt and no diaper,
like a crop top.
Yeah, well, you want it to be short so that there's no messes on the shirt, or fewer messes.
This is getting more and more pride parade as you describe it.
Yeah,
okay.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah. So it's day 4 of the 3-day training. It's supposed to work at the end of the 3rd day. It did not work. So yeah, my life is very.
But now, what's the premise here? What's the logic?
What's the logic of the 3-day?
Yeah, because we weren't trained this way, were we?
Yeah, this is like a fast track method. It's supposed to be that you just take the diaper off, and if the baby wants to go, you immediately, like, as they start like squirming, like you can tell they're about to go, take them to the potty. Sit them on the potty. They go on the potty, and you do this every time. And you're just washing them like a hawk the whole time.
This is like training a puppy.
Washing them.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be there with your eyes on their crotch the whole time. Can't look away. No Twitter even. So it was devastating for me. Yeah, I don't know. It was really tough. But you're always with the baby, so that you can catch it, because it just happens instantly, And turns out they pee all the time. They're just constantly peeing, not like in one piece the way we do. We like hold it and we go all at once, but they're just like constantly going because you can in a diaper.
Yeah.
So they just have to. So they have to learn to hold it in at longer periods. They have to learn to go on the potty and not make a mess, because that's a bad experience, traumatic experience for them as well. Yeah.
Okay,
it's
but
supposed to work.
This is some kind of fast track thing. So is this like
Yeah.
the advanced placement of potty training?
Basically,
Why
yeah,
do
yeah.
you is this an Asian thing? Is this what you're getting at?
This is not this is not an Asian thing. This is a white people thing, I think. But there are Asian methods which are interesting. My parents said that they potty trained me. They started this method, like not this specific method, but like they started potty training me at like a year, which was, I feel like, pretty early. But there are Asian parents East Asian parents who start even before then, like when the kids are just a couple
like
of months
in utero,
old. Like,
maybe.
maybe
Does anybody do that?
No, I think a little later than that, but like when they can set up, like, but
really,
but even I think it's even earlier than that. Haven't you seen these little videos of these little Asian babies, and they have these little onesies with the butt, like a little cutout at the butt.
No,
you haven't seen
I don't watch those kind of videos. No,
cut out. But no, it's like the Asian grandparents who are like training their kid to like poo and pee.
But how do you hold the kid up? If they can't even walk, how are they supposed to do that? If they're under,
they condition them. Well, the video I saw was like this grandma like held the kid up on a potty, and then she like whistled or something. The kid went.
Wow, like a whistle. Like she blew a whistle. An air horn.
That she just did a little whistle, but I don't know if this is all Asians all the time, but this is something I saw. And then I was reading about how in China they potty train very early, in bits and pieces, but yeah, pretty early.
Okay, you know what I'm gonna. I don't want to dwell on this, but because this came up another time with us, so like you know how they don't have toilets in so many parts of Asia, even like even a nice restaurant, there could be like a hole in the floor in the fancy bathroom. So is it easier for a child to get potty trained without like the scary toilet? Just have a hole.
I like the holes. I mean,
I think I would have been less afraid. I think most kids would be less afraid if
I think they're just like
being
easier
outside.
To go on. Yeah, they're easier to go on. They're just easier to go on. That's what it is. Like they're easier to go on. You know, especially number 2. I think it's easier. That's why they sell the squatty potty. That's what we talked about in a podcast before.
Right.
So from that perspective, I don't know, because as a kid, I found the American toilets better because I was afraid I'd fall in the other ones. You know. Because you're tiny, and the other toilets. The other toilets are bigger because there's like it's not a tiny hole.
They think they're going to fall in. That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah.
I thought I was going to fall in.
I think this is going to become the new status symbol. Like in a house, like if you're really sophisticated, you do not have toilets. You just have a hole.
No. It's the other way. The hole is scarier because the hole's pretty wide. Yeah, the hole's pretty large, and you have to squat over it. And if you your squat fails, your legs fail, you're gonna fall in.
Okay.
And not everybody has like great squatting muscles.
I mean, yeah, you got to be, if you do Pilates or bar method or something, you'd be very good at it.
You get pretty good at it. Yeah, you get pretty good at it.
Okay. All right.
Some of those,
right. I got to think about this. Okay. Well,
I have the kind of potties that are like, they look like little toilets. And they're really cute. They just look like a little teeny tiny toilets.
Okay.
With a little flush, except it plays a little jingle too.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's some potties where when you go in them, they sing to you.
That's terrifying. How do you expect to get anything done? That's a way of getting an adult off the toilet as quickly as possible. Yeah.
But getting a child on is tough, and this is a way to do it.
All right. Well, so this is another overachieving Sarah thing, Asian thing.
Is it? Yeah.
This is very germane to what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about affirmative action, is the SCOTUS ruling. And then we're going to move on to something maybe not entirely different. Maybe it's totally related. Unfuckable Hate Nerds.
Yeah, it's a tablet piece.
These things are actually related now that I think of it.
Okay. Well, that's the second bit. That has to do with men, sad, nerdy men, and how hard it is for them to get laid. And
especially if they couldn't get into an Ivy League school because
Exactly.
of their race.
And then we have the bonus at the
Yeah.
end, which not all of you get access to, but some of you special people do.
Yeah.
And what are we going to talk about there?
We're going to talk about another very controversial question, and that is whether 25-year-old women are
Right.
more attractive than
Right.
35-year-old women.
Right. So this is a Twitter controversy it's a stupid Twitter controversy. It's been going on for days. And we're going to give our takes.
The answer might surprise you. So, yeah.
Probably won't, but it might.
It might. I have some surprising things to say. So,
okay.
And
All right.
anyway, in the time that people are listening to this, they can become a paying subscriber and be
Mhm.
able to hear that. So,
All right. Okay.
go
Let's get
now.
to it. Let's
Affirmative action. This is exactly this ruling directly affects people in your position, or people who were in your position as a very hyper achieving, brilliant South Asian. This must have hit home, as they say. So what were your thoughts?
I don't know if I feel strongly any one way, except that I'm glad it's been that the ruling went the way that it did. I'm surprised to see so many defenses of it.
Of the ruling or of how it was?
Of affirmative action still.
Yeah.
So many people mourning the Obamas, talking about it.
Yeah, it's a catastrophic day.
Right. And I wish it had just gone a little bit more silently, but I guess it's a naive thing to hope for, given how touchy the subject is. I do think it's one of those things that way more people pretend to be for affirmative action than actually, are for the practice. Because I remember when I was in college, I had one really weird experience, really telling experience, I think, when it came to affirmative action. I had a little political science class where we were assigned a paper to take a position on affirmative action, and pro or for it or against it, and to submit it to the professor, and he would grade it like blindly. I don't know how he did it, but somehow he when he was initially grading it, he wouldn't look at our names in case people were concerned, I suppose, about having their names attached to it. Regardless, so he asked for these papers. We submitted them, and then the next day we had a discussion about it. And he came to class, and he was. I remember him saying he was so surprised that I had such a liberal university with so many young people, that the vast majority of the papers were against affirmative action, and sometimes very strongly against it. And I think there was either only one person or just two people who were for affirmative action. And I thought he was really surprised by that. I was a little surprised by that. And then the discussion that followed afterwards, I think, was a lot more open than it would have been otherwise. I think there was something about the fact that we knew going into it that the most of the people around us agreed with us, that there wasn't the same kind of stigma or shame for piping up and sharing your opinion. Yeah. I think a lot of what happens when it comes to affirmative action is virtue signaling and preference falsification, especially when it comes to white liberals who are doing this all the time. I think there was a Gallup poll that this is from 2019, and it found that American support for affirmative action programs rises. And if you look at exactly how it was rising and who it was which are the groups were becoming more pro affirmative action, women like it. Both women and men grew, but women seem to grow a little more. Women are still more pro affirmative action than men. And white liberals seem to be the people, the white increase seems to be what really caused this change. Like what was really motivating the change was the gains in support that came from white Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some polling that 65% of Black Americans oppose affirmative action. I'm not sure what year that poll came from, but relatively recent.
They're all over the place too,
yeah.
because it depends on what you use. If you use the word affirmative action, you're going to get a different result than if you use racial preferences. You're going to get usually a far more negative response. And this is this is a problem with polling. I really take polls with a grain of salt. I wish this is something that we learned to be, this is something that we learned well after the 2016 election, when we found that all the polls that said that Donald Trump was definitely going to lose, or was so likely to lose, because they had talked to all these people and they were talking about how much they hated him. And it turns out that obviously he wasn't that hated by so many people. Obviously, some people were lying about their preferences and lying to pollsters, not just that pollsters didn't gauge it properly by talking to the right populations, but also I think that they were lying to pollsters.
Out lied.
Yeah.
What was the racial makeup of the class that had this poll and in this discussion? Do you remember?
Of the class that
your
had
class,
this,
when you had to do your assignments and you were surprised in the class that you were in?
It was mostly white people. But like white kids, but there were a good sprinkling of minorities, and it seemed like majority of the minorities were against it too.
Mm-hmm.
I know that one of the very few, perhaps the only person, or maybe one of the two people who spoke up was Black, for affirmative action herself. Yeah. And I felt really bad for her. I remember feeling really bad for her because she really I think she was surprised by how many people were against it. And I think she felt very threatened and upset about it. And I understood where she was coming from, and I understood why she was feeling that way, because I think people lie to people like that all the time.
And this was college. This was college. Yeah.
This was college.
I mean, I wonder if that's so complicated, because I wonder if she felt that she had gotten in because of affirmative action, but then how much had she even, because it's one of these things that you really don't want to think about. I mean, if you even suspect that you have that kind of advantage, it's a cope, as you would say. And I would call it psychological self-preservation, to just keep your mind away from it. Think about other things, because otherwise you will go insane. There's really no alternative. I mean, you could just decide, renounce your whole life and say, I'm stepping aside because I had this unfair advantage. Be self-flagellating.
Or you just don't believe it's unfair. You adopt a whole set of politics that tell you that it wasn't unfair to begin with. That it was birth was, at birth you were set back due to your race in this country, and since then you and your family have been carrying the weight of this, and now you deserve this leg up. So I think that's the best cope. Really.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been seeing in the discourse is people say, yes, obviously Asians have been at a huge disadvantage. This has been immensely unfair. However, an Asian person still doesn't have to walk through the world as a Black person. At the end of the day, even if the Asian person has to go to a state school or doesn't get into the top tier elite, the massive advantage they have just by virtue of not being Black more than makes up for it. And I can't believe that people are still talking this way.
Yeah.
I mean, I can believe it, but it's so embarrassing.
It's just, and it feels very untrue, especially when you look at the kinds of people who are saying it. I remember having arguments about things about affirmative action, but these kinds of racial allotment type, tokenism and that kind of thing with Black progressives who were so biracial that they were lighter skinned than me. You know what I mean? Like technically Black people, telling me, that they're super oppressed and they're way more oppressed. And I, I don't feel like if I go to a very racist part of the country, I'm going to be treated a whole lot better. I grew up Muslim in post 9/11 America. It wasn't a fantastic time for people like me. I don't, I don't see how that experience cannot be the same, or at least similar to the Black experience of at least some Blacks, right? Like the biracial Blacks, the ones who are growing up in more liberal parts of the country. It feels like there's such a flattening of, if you're Black, definitely you're having this harder time. If you're Asian, definitely you're having an easier time. There's so much. It depends on so much as to what your personal experience is. It felt to me like just a very simplified look at race.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same
didn't really map onto
way
my
it's been
reality.
going with the woman conversation. Everything has been flattened. I mean, the earth is flat in this respect. So if you are a woman, you are automatically at a disadvantage, or feel threatened, or feel less than, or have been told that you are less than. I mean, it's just it's a gross generalization that has nothing to do with.
But
obviously,
it is the case that sometimes it is beneficial to be a woman, and sometimes it is beneficial to be a person of color. Race hoaxes,
I would say often.
Right.
More than sometimes. For a woman, okay, this is
for a woman, definitely.
For a woman, I would say more often than not,
it
is beneficial to be a woman.
I would,
especially if you're hot, but we're going to get to that later. But
sure, but in a social context, definitely, like in the social world, I think so. I agree. But what these race hoaxers tell us, these fake brown people, fake Black people who are just Rachel Dolezals of the world, have been so many. I feel like every other month a new one comes out.
Why hasn't Rachel Dolezal
Native
weighed
American
in on this?
professor?
I haven't seen an op-ed from her.
No, not yet. She should come on the pod.
She's probably writing it.
She should come on. She should.
Rachel,
this
if
is
you're
her
listening,
space,
please,
special place just for her.
But in a fun way.
What race these hoaxers tell us is that they have judged, and that they have judged because of the way they have behaved, because of what they're trying to pass as, that they think that there is an advantage to being seen as Native American or Black or brown or whatever it is this person's pretending to be. So obviously there are contexts in the United States where it is beneficial to be a brown person, Black person, POC, whatever. So much so that a white woman would give up her privilege and do it. Why is it always white women? Do white men not do this?
Well, white women are the new white men. I mean, look,
white men don't hate race. They don't pretend to be brown, do they? Sometimes they do, I guess. I haven't heard of one.
I'm sure there are
one or two
examples. I mean, Soul Man. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. No. Was that it?
No, don't get that reference.
Yeah. I was just, I mean, there's definitely, obviously there's a whole history of passing in the other direction. But I mean,
but it changed, right? And that should tell us something. It changed.
Right. Well, I mean, but would you say that it's advantageous to be in a minority position when it comes to like applying for something and getting picked for something? Like if you are applying to a school that already has too many women, you are going to be at a disadvantage as a woman. Mm-hmm. If you're applying, like if you are trying to be like a professional ballet dancer, for instance, you're in a much worse position as a woman. The most excellent ballerina in the world is going to have a much harder time getting like a professional dancing gig than a pretty mediocre male ballet dancer. Just because there aren't enough. This is a scarcity.
Right, but that situation makes more sense to me. That kind of affirmative action makes more sense to me because for certain plays, you need males. You need in a company, you might need a certain amount of male dancers because you need them to fill a certain role, right? And lift the female, ballerinas up, leap whatever they do. I don't know anything about ballet, but in that regard, affirmative action makes sense if you were to prioritize males. But then if you were to do that, we need a Black ballerina. that doesn't make sense because you don't need them to be, you just need them to be good and you need them to be female.
Right. I
You
mean,
don't need them to be a specific race.
This has happened in the ballet world a lot.
Oh, really?
And there
Okay.
was that whole, so Misty Copeland, who I think she was the first Black ballet dancer in the New York City Ballet. She was like a spokesperson for is it Under Armour? There was it was a athletic clothing company.
Mhm.
And the whole ad campaign was based on the idea that she had gotten this letter from a ballet company after auditioning saying that she just wasn't good enough and she would never make it as a ballet dancer because she didn't have the right kind of body type and because she was a Black woman. And everyone just like fell for this and thought it was such an amazing story that she had overcome this adversity. And it apparently was just completely fabricated by the ad agency. So
It's impossible to, I mean, you would get in everywhere, right? And I think, so you just mentioned to me.
Now you would. I don't, I mean, in the
maybe
70s
not
or 80s. No, I mean, certainly in the last 20 years.
Yeah. Things have changed. But in more recent times, definitely. It's an advantage in so many different fields and professions and contexts. I think it's interesting to me that people still feel like they either they want to deny it or they want to say that, well, it's been so bad for so long that now all this preferential treatment is actually just getting us, we're just getting even now, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're getting even by having everybody mistrust you. You know, John McWhorter had a good piece, actually just dropped today on the 4th, and he talked about, you know, growing up middle class in Philadelphia in the 80s as a Black kid, and, you know, really smart, really good student, but maybe not like excellent, absolute top tier student. He had a lot of hobbies. He played in the orchestra. He was like, you know, well-rounded. And his mother was a Black academic. And he talks about growing up, you know, having it be pretty clear to him that he wouldn't have to work as hard to get into a good school as a white kid because he was Black. And he talks about really kind of coasting. I mean, this is a high level coasting from John McWhorter. I think not all coasting is created equal. But he said, really, he was the beneficiary of a lot of advancement. And then said it wasn't until he was a graduate student and actually teaching graduate students that he had to face the fact that he was not as rigorous in his linguistics career as others. And in fact, he had a very particular specialty. And he had to catch up. And I've heard him talk about this on the podcast with Glenn Lowry too. Like, you know, he's been very aware of, he's got some imposter syndrome. I think that's the only way to put it. And he's very transparent about it. And I think, I think a lot of people do for whatever reason. And this gets back to what I was talking about before. Like if you have imposter syndrome, you really have sort of, you know, you've got two ways to go. You can either completely out yourself and just fall on your sword, or you can continue to, you know, pretend just to salvage whatever's left.
Or you just, you know, you adopt the politics that make it seem like it's not, you know, it's not as bad. Or, but I think ultimately you do know if you can't keep up with your peers, you find it difficult. Grades are one way to tell that you can't keep up with them, but there are other ways too. You know, you can just talk to people, you can have conversations, you can, you know, be as part of seminars in college and know that you can't really keep up with the pace of things or whatever. And I, you know, it's interesting to read this because I'm going to quote, because he said that, you know, I grew up upper middle class, so not middle class, upper middle class in Philadelphia. McWhorter.
He says upper middle class?
He says upper middle class.
Okay.
In Philadelphia in 1980s, as early as high school, I picked up from remarks of my mothers who taught at a university, as well as comments in the air at my school, that Black kids didn't have to achieve perfect grades and test scores in order to be accepted at top colleges. As a direct result, I satisfied myself with being an A- or B+ student, pursuing my nerdy hobbies instead of seeking the academic mountaintop. I was pretty sure it wouldn't affect my future in the way that it might for my white peers. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to read this because I kind of had a similar experience, but my conclusion was kind of the opposite, which was I recognized pretty early on in the conversations I started to have with, other kids in my poor little apartment complex, other South Asian kids, that there was probably no chance that I was going to get into an elite college, not just because, obviously it's competitive, but because it's also expensive and we were poor. And then on top of that, unlike our Black and Hispanic neighbors who were as poor as us, we were not going to get a racial advantage. We were going to get a racial disadvantage.
Yeah.
That we would have to work harder than even the white kids who were, a social class ahead of us. Who were making more money, whose parents were living in nicer homes, like middle class families. We would have to beat those guys even, because of our races. And there was an understanding that there was a quota, and not a direct, they're not explicit about it, but that there was a quota of how many Asians they were going to accept, and we were competing with each other. And we knew, we're like, okay, that sucks. Like, that's hard. Well, I would like to compete with the white kids. I would like to compete with like the rest of the student body, the other underrepresented or the other minorities who were as poor as me. But I wasn't going to compete with them. I was going to compete with the Asians, which was tough. And so I kind of felt like, all right, I'm never going to get in. I'm not going to make it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the, privileged background. My parents don't know anything about the college application process. I have to tell them, what they need to do. I used to fill out, forms and everything that parents are supposed to do, but I would just fill it all out since I was a kid. They would just sign it because they could, they're like, okay, I don't really know what this is. It's going to take a long time for me to understand what's going on. And they were smart people. This wasn't their culture. This wasn't their native language. It was just tough for them to understand this context. So this was something that I had to do on my own. And as a result, I made a lot of mistakes. If I could do it all over again, I would do it very differently. I would write my essay differently. I would.
What would you write your essay on?
I guess, as per yours and my past conversation,
how institutions have fallen. Woke institutions. No.
Yeah. I think I would emphasize how disadvantaged I was, I guess, but I don't know if it would have helped because I still was Asian. I was just one smart.
And a lot of Asians are disadvantaged. I mean, Asians live in I don't know if this is true across the board. In New York City, Asians have the highest poverty level among people who are working. Asian poverty is much, much higher, I think, than most people realize because they get out of it within one generation.
They get out of it quickly, right?
Yeah.
And they sometimes get out of it within, like, in that generation.
Yeah.
So that happened to my parents. Like, we started off with literally nothing, and stayed that way for quite some time. But my parents worked hard, and there were steps backs, but there were also step forwards. And now they live a nice, comfortable lifestyle in a way that, I would have loved to grow up the way, my baby sister grew up. She grew up in a totally different family and environment because by the time she was older, we had a lot more means. And then we also had sort of this institutional knowledge from me.
Yeah.
I had already gone through it all. I knew the classes to take. I knew the pitfalls in the system. I could tell her and she could improve, and she did.
Yeah.
So there's, I just knew early on that I was never going to get into the top schools. I knew it. And so the effect on me was also to do as John, the same effect of as John McWhorter has, which was satisfying yourself with with not achieving the very best grades that I knew I could if I had put in an effort. I started skipping a lot more classes, like skipping school a lot more often.
Really? You skipped school? I can't.
Yeah,
what did
but
you
like in
do?
a
Were you
smart
like
way.
smoking under the bleachers?
No,
what were you doing?
I would go to the library, Megan.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person because this is a boring class. This teacher sucks. I don't need it. I don't need to hear the lesson. It's not, my grade's not going to suffer. And I'm going to go to, the orchestra. I would go to the orchestra class, hang out. I was friends with the band teachers. hang out with them.
I mean, so I'm curious because, in this lawsuit, it was revealed. I mean, this is back in 2000. I mean, this has been going on for so long, but it was revealed at some point along the way that Harvard evaluated applicants according to like, a series of traits. And so there were things like likability, helpfulness, kindness, courage, positive personality. And at one point, there was a admissions officer at MIT, I think, that was caught referring to Asians as textureless math grinds, that kind of thing. Like, I'm wondering how you felt about that, like as a young Asian person. Like, did you have a sense of yourself as like being perceived as not having as good a personality as somebody else?
Not
Another
until
race?
later, but but South Asians generally don't have that.
Right. They're not,
Like we like
you're not as
we
bad as
technically
Chinese.
so
Yeah.
it is true that we will not get into Ivy Leagues at I think it's even at some point, I don't know when, I saw a chart that like broke down even Asians into like specific, like East Asian, like South Asian, that kind of thing, and looked at their rates at acceptance. And my people are actually, it seemed like from that data, I haven't been able to find it since, that South Asians get hit really hard. I think the hardest at Ivy League schools. We are different, I think, as like I remember I had a lot of AP courses that I took. I had a lot of Asian friends, South Asian and East Asian. It seemed to me there was a personality difference.
Between South Asians and East Asians.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was a cultural thing. I think sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's just like these cultural differences, your at-home environments, bleeding into what you do, what you do at school and how you behave at school, or there's something else going on. But the South Asians were louder, not louder than the white kids.
No,
the white kids were way louder. The white kids. So here's the other thing. There was enough Asians, South and East Asians, in my middle school and high school that we sort of self-segregated a little bit. I hung out with the white kids, like more than half the time. I had a lot of white friends. And my Asian friends were like suspicious of this. They thought it just kind of made me like, maybe I was stupid.
Right. You're slumming.
Like I'm dumb. And that's why I'm hanging out with the dumb white kids.
Or you're trying to feel superior. You want to be the best one. So you're hanging out with the dummies.
I think they also, some of them just assumed I remember there was one girl who was Indian. And we started hanging out. We went to to high school together, but I didn't hang out with her. We only started hanging out in college. And one day she was like, "Huh, you're brown? You're desi?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "But you didn't really hang out with us that much. You hung out with the white kids. I thought you were like Hispanic." I was like,
she thought you were Hispanic.
Yeah. And I was like, I get it. I get why you think that, but no, I am not. But it did feel like my Asian friends definitely prioritized being good in class, participating well, doing the homework, doing a good job, getting good grades. Like I didn't see a lot of parental influence, although that's, the whole tiger mom thing is something people talk about all the time. And I think it is true for some parents. I don't know if it needs to be true if your peer group is the one that's policing, and not even policing, but everyone has the expectation that everyone's going to do well. And everybody we have these values. I think that's a bigger influence. And from what I understand about, the social science on, what affects the way kids develop, is it the parental influence, or is it their peer group and their peer environment? I think that it makes sense from my experience, because the Asian kids we were doing homework together. When I would hang out with them, we were in, study groups.
Okay. But so, I mean, I remember being in high school and observing like the Asian kids, especially the first generation ones, the ones who, had come over, their parents were, barely English speakers. Some of them were ridden so hard by their parents, and it was honestly upsetting. I mean, it felt abusive. And, there was this whole thing of like the parents, they want nothing more than for the kids to assimilate because that's why they came there. But at the same time, if they assimilate, then they're slacking off and being too American and not studying and not, getting the highest grades in order to get into Harvard. I mean, it was sort of like, be this, go from A to D, but don't go to B to C. Like it was just, and it's like, I was so, it just made me angry, frankly, at the parents. I mean, I understand that situation, but like, it just seems so unfair. Like those kids, there are definitely things that they were like not allowed to do that did affect their personalities. Like you didn't see them dating a lot or having opinions about culture. And I mean, not saying that that's that important, but that's what leads to these stereotypes. And that's what, where the textureless grind comes in. And I'm kind of mad at the parents about it, frankly.
I think there's, I agree that there's definitely too much of it. The Tiger Mom thing is real. And, in India, I don't know about China as much. I know about Chinese Americans. I don't know about China as much, but in India, there's always, these like stories that come out from time to time about kids that kill themselves.
Oh yeah.
For before exam times and stuff like that. So there's definitely a cultural emphasis on academic performance that has these, like at the edges, it definitely has these people who are borderline abusive to their children. But I think those are the kinds of people who it's a personality thing almost, that every culture has its points of like, this is what gets you social status. This is what, or this is what's valuable. And you will have some people at the edges of those cultures that will value that so much, that they will, ride their kids, just be,
I mean,
brutal,
it's kind of like
abusive almost.
The opposite spectrum of the beauty pageant mom or something.
Right. That's what I mean.
Deeply upsetting.
This is just how some people compete, and if they were in a different culture, they would compete in a different way. They would still abuse their kids in order to get status, unless there was somebody else they could abuse to get status, unless it was their husband, getting a, so it's just, I think it's a way in which a kind of a personality manifests. I do agree that it's kind of a little bit of a problem, but at the same time, I think it is better to have that problem as a group than to not have it, because when you're a new immigrant to a country, especially, it's not enough to do as well as the average American, because your parents don't have retirement funds. You don't have a fallback at all. You don't have, if something horrible happens, you're all screwed. And I knew that. And I had the weight of that on my shoulders all the time, thinking that we didn't have backup plans. That we really you have this one shot and you have to make it. You have to make it, because there isn't going to be another shot, because you're just like teetering at the edge of being, of not quite poverty, but just being, living day to day in a much more miserable way than you could be. I mean, I knew people whose, dad had a heart attack at 50. It's really common in South Asians to have heart attacks really early. Our food's terrible. It's so bad for you. And then on top of that, they don't value exercise. But there's also seems like there's some genetic component as well. I'm not sure about the exact breakdown. But South Asian men often have heart attacks early. And I knew somebody whose dad had a heart attack. He passed away. And, it was an immigrant family. So what were they going to do? Their mom did not have, she was a housewife. What was she going to do? Where was she going to work? And there are these kids who were teenagers at that time who had to figure out how to get part-time jobs. I mean, the mom moved in with like some extended family member that was living, a city or something away. But the point is that it's easy to be ruined when you don't have a huge social network in a new country. You don't have the funds to, back you up. And you don't have the institutional knowledge that others you might not know about the welfare programs. You might not know about,
Right.
how to get access to social services.
To how to work the system. Yeah.
Right. You don't know how to do that. So I think poverty is a much scarier thing for them. It seems much scarier, and it actually is much scarier as an immigrant. And also they're coming from a context, in a part of the world where really there's not a lot of ways to break out, and there's not a lot of prosperity to go around anyway, and this is one way to do it. And the difference between a middle-class lifestyle and being a doctor is actually the difference between living well and living badly, because middle class is not actually a good place to be. That was something I had to teach my parents. I had to talk to them about it. I had to say, being middle class in America is okay. It's actually, you're fine. You have, you can have a retirement account. You can be okay. It's not scary. It's not the end of the world the way that they presumed that it was, because in Pakistan there really isn't much of a middle class. You just do well or you don't.
Right. Yeah. Well, I actually thought the best piece about this was in the New Yorker by J. Caspian Kang.
Mm-hmm.
We can link to it, but basically he's reminding us what I think we all know, but is sometimes forgotten, is that this has been window dressing from the beginning. I mean, the way this has been handled by these schools, it's the vast majority of, or at least a significant number of the Black kids who are in these elite schools are the children of wealthy immigrants from Africa, places like Nigeria, or high achieving African-American families.
Biracial, often very biracial.
Yes.
Often I have one Black grandparent and now I'm putting Black. And I don't think this is not the spirit of why we to the extent that I'm sympathetic to affirmative action, I'm sympathetic to American descendants of slaves. That's why that's the group I'm sympathetic to. I'm not sympathetic to Jamaican immigrants in the same way. I'm not sympathetic to Nigerian, sons of billionaires in the same way. I have a sympathy for a specific group that grew up in America, and there wasn't a lot of effort to make sure that this program really benefited them, and in fact, it didn't benefit them.
No. I mean,
as much.
Yeah, no. I mean, he writes it was doomed from the moment it started, because it was stripped. Affirmative action was stripped of its moral force. So
right. It was instead this diversity thing. That's why the conversation becomes about how valuable it is to have a diverse student body, because then you're going to meet all these wonderful people and learn all this stuff about. But my experience was that everybody was self-segregating. That was my experience. I don't know how enriched I was.
I think he makes a great point. I mean, the fact is that Harvard has just an enormous endowment. I'm just going to read a few sentences in this piece. He says, Harvard did not have to pursue such a comical vision of social justice. It could have vastly expanded its class sizes, relaxed its admission standards, and cut off its pipelines from exclusive private schools. It could have opened its doors to hundreds of community college transfers. If Harvard were truly committed to increasing access to elite education, it could have invested a fraction of its $53 billion endowment in free college preparatory academies across America and guided hundreds of poor Black and Latino students through the university gates. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, I think if you look at it, there are many ways to look at affirmative action. But I mean, so much of it seems to come down to it's not clear that it's benefiting the people that it's supposed to benefit. I mean, even Blacks as a group, much less descendants of slaves.
Yeah.
It clearly creates a tension and animosity that we don't need in society. It creates a shadow on the people that do graduate. Anybody who graduates, whether or not they belong. So there is a cohort of Black kids in America who go to Yale and they belong at Yale. They're that good. They belong. They deserve to be there. They would have been there even if they were white. But now there's a shadow.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Cast over them. There's a doubt. I mean, internally, but also externally, people are thinking about it. It's really naive to imagine that people who have gone through the college system in the United States, who know what, the realities of these kinds of racial quotas or racial advantages, would not think that when they saw a Black MFA graduate or
anything.
or anything. Yeah, really anything. Yeah.
I mean,
anything at all.
Engineering, medical school, law school, anything.
And then you would doubt them. And as an employer, you might doubt them. You might not give them the critical projects because you doubt them.
Yeah, no.
At some point, you would also be right to doubt them.
Yeah.
If indeed there is a mismatch that's going on with affirmative action, and we know that that's the case, although this is contested in social science. I don't feel like it's actually contested. It's fairly clear if you actually have experience at any selective college in the United States that there is a mismatch going on. But there's a cascading effect of the mismatch too, where, elite colleges will take up, they will take up the kids who deserve to go to elite schools. Then, okay, that's not enough. That's only a few percentages. You need more Black people. So you're going to take the kids who should be going to, a tier 2 school, or a tier 3 school, all these different cohorts of kids you're going to take in to fill in whatever percentage of Black students you think makes your school looks good. But what does that leave for the less selective colleges? They actually have nobody that matches with them at all. At least the elite schools get to have some amount of Black graduates that deserve to be there because they are matched. But because they pull in so many other kids as well to just meet their, diversity,
It's really a setup. I mean, it's actually it feels quite cynical.
It does
from certain angles. It's a trap. I would be very distressed.
Yeah, and I think though it's not gonna. I mean, this is gonna change things for like 3 years.
No, not even. I mean, all anyone has to do is write in their essay mention. I mean, this is a formality. Actually,
yeah. It's good that it was struck down. It's good that it's clear that this is not no longer something the court considers permissible. So they just have to be careful in how they do it. But of course, they're still going to do it.
Yeah,
they're still going to find a way to pad certain numbers. They did that in the California systems. It was ruled unconstitutional, 20 something years ago, and
in the 90s,
it started
more than that. Yeah.
Initially, it caused a drop in Black enrollment only at the top colleges, not in general. Not overall. They just went to a college that matched them as students a little bit better. Many of them still went to good colleges. Many of them still, graduated. It was. But at the very, very elite schools, you saw fewer Black kids for a while until they found a way to get around it and to get them in anyway. I think if we, what we really are losing is just there's the spirit of meritocracy that doesn't matter anymore to the American educational system, which I find really, really alarming. I mean, it's like this inversion of what you're supposed to care about. The thing that you should value most, you no longer value. The admissions officers should be the people who are thinking, who is the best, who is the kid with the most promise? But we're looking at kids with most promises, but they're not looking at that. That's not what they're trying to do.
No, I mean, we should talk about this another time, but then I'm thinking like, okay, well, how do you measure? Is it only a test? Do you not care about people's writing? Do you not care about if they have some very particular talent? I mean, the fact is John McWhorter is a more interesting person than he would have been if he hadn't been pursuing his hobbies and instead was taking all AP classes and getting all A+. But the difference is that
he could when he needed to. You know what I mean? And I think that what's never going to happen, and probably should happen, is something that approximates an IQ test a little bit better. Like that's what should happen.
All right, that should be your platform.
Never going to happen. Okay. That's pure evil. But why? Because that's what the SAT is trying to do to some degree. So if you have a measure of like general competency plus grit and hard work, and there's another way that you're measuring this, and then creativity, and there's another way you're maybe measuring that, and that's writing or whatever. But why aren't we more clear and upfront and direct about what we are looking for in a student and what makes for a good student? I mean, John McWhorter is very smart regardless of what grade he got, and that's clear with his with who he's become now. And that matters? Are we allowed to talk about that? Are we allowed to say that being smart matters, and often doing well in academic environments, it correlates with being with being intelligent?
But I wonder if highly, I'm thinking of like Elon Musk kind of people, like, extreme geniuses notoriously do poorly in school, right? I mean,
right. So
Einstein
what
was
captures them?
considered
What captures them, right? Like what captures people like him? It's interesting because I found that for the people that I knew, so I was in the gifted program back in when I K through 12, and the gifted kids were very unique bunch. Did you have experience with the gifted program?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah,
I was in it. I think I flunked out of it at a certain point. I was in it when I was
out of it.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I was in it.
It must have been something different. You can't.
I was
out.
in it in
Once
elementary school. I mean, this is embarrassing. I think I like peaked. I think I like peaked in fifth grade or something.
It must have been something different. It could have been an advanced course because you can't flunk out of GT. Once you're in GT, you're in GT.
All right. Okay. Well.
Because what they have with the gift, at least in modern gifted programs, is basically they have a test that's like an IQ test, and then you are in the gifted program forever unless you choose to drop out. Unless you choose to say, I don't want to be in the program anymore.
All right.
It was probably like an advanced course, like a pre-AP, AP kind of thing, which is for like just academically gifted kids. There's no test, you either like survive or don't, whatever. Anyway, so I was in that program for like a long time and like segregated with those kids in middle school. And then at the end of middle school, in eighth grade, I had to drop out so that I could stay in orchestra because whatever.
That sounds like something I would do.
Yeah. Well,
I was my parents musically abused me. My parents were like, slackers in every way, but they were like Asians when it came to music. It was
a tough call. It was a tough call. But the reason I made it is because dropping from orchestra meant that I wouldn't be able to do it in high school. But gifted program, it was going to be different in high school anyway, so it didn't matter. And I would always be marked as in it. It's on my transcript. It's still there. It never, like, you can't shake it off no matter what. But there's a special program and I was no longer participating in it. And I noticed that when I left the gifted program and went into like just the advanced classes, which were supposed to be almost equal, we weren't told what the difference was. I remember noticing a difference in the kind of student that was in one class and in the gifted class. Like the gifted students were just a varied bunch, varied bunch. There were jocks in there. There was preppy girls, like popular people.
Oh, so it wasn't like a
nerdy people.
Nerd thing.
It wasn't a nerd fest. It wasn't a nerd fest. Which is why I was puzzled by it, because so many kids in the gifted program were not all that studious. They were not the most studious kids around, but some of them were really very much the kind of kid that's going to drop out. And some of them did drop out in high school. Many of them, 3 of the kids that were in my gifted class, just of 20 of the boys, went on to play college football. So it wasn't really. This
totally
really
flies in the face of your theory that we should just measure everything by IQ tests. Because if that were the case, all these kids would get into Ivy League school and then they would blow it off and not be deserving.
Well, I don't know, because I think it depends on if you apply. I think if you're that kid and you apply to an Ivy League school, then you probably want that environment. And I think that,
they say they do.
They self-sorted, but I think it should be sorted based on ability to some degree, in addition to hard work and grit and determination. A lot of those kids would not get into an Ivy League because they dropped out of high. They stopped paying attention really, really early on. Like we lost them early for whatever reason. We lost them early, but of course that's measured too. Like we have GPA matters. I'm not saying drop everything and only have an IQ test, but I think we have to have something that indicates just pure ability, like pure reasoning ability.
Yeah.
Differentiated from everything else.
It's too bad there's not a blood test.
From everything else.
Is somebody working on this?
I just,
I feel like Razib Khan should be working on some kind of like blood, like, like
blood
a Theranos kind of thing where you just take your blood and it goes into a big
What's
machine.
your blood type?
And my blood type, O positive, which I think is the most basic.
Me too.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
basic. Oh, blood sisters.
That's very big. No, but
blood
like
twinsies.
there should be a Theranos machine where you give one drop of blood and then it goes through and it goes around and it tells you if you're gifted or not, what your talents might be, what kind of college you are likely to succeede at.
What do you think?
It's all of this.
What would you think? What do you think is a measure, or how should we change the system in a way that would be fairer?
I mean, what does fair mean? There's no such thing as fair.
How would it be? How would you change the system in a way that it would function better for society?
I don't know that
and
it can function any better. I mean,
Really?
you know what? I think that's the wrong question because
What's the right question?
fact is that we have such a disastrous education system.
Right.
People are the whole idea of talking about colleges. We're talking about this because people in the media like us went to college, and it was a huge part of our lives, and it was a huge focus before we got there. And it's much sort of sexier to think about college. But the fact is, much more energy, and I guess I you know what, I do like the idea of a lot of these highly endowed institutions sort of collaborating with K through 12 education or the public system in some way. And fewer people should go to college, frankly.
I agree with that. I'm actually kind of anti-college, so that I guess
know. Why are we even talking about this? You're not even going to send your kids to college.
Why we talk about it is because, unfortunately, society still cares a lot about it. Unfortunately, it still matters to employers what
you've said here that you think that that's changing. In the tech world.
It's starting to. It's in the tech world. Yeah, it is. And I hope that continues elsewhere. And I think it might if we continue down this anti-meritocracy road, because as an employer, what is the point of a name brand? What is the point of Harvard? The idea is that it's supposed to show something about, because Harvard has done the work of, really figuring out whether or not they're talented and worthy of that education. So you're depending on that, but I no longer depend on that in the same way. If I got an application, and in fact that has happened like more recently, got an application of somebody who's going to school at Harvard, I'm not automatically thinking that this is wow, I'm so impressed. I'm not automatically thinking that anymore.
Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking too, as we're talking about this, the entire point of going to these elite schools is to network and meet other elite people. And that is much more relevant in a pre-digital age. The only way to have access to those corridors is to physically be in them. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if now just the nature of connection and communication and the nature of access to ideas and other people and audiences has totally changed the game, and it's going to be irrelevant. Like who you're playing golf with may be much less relevant than it was. I mean, a lot of people still care about who they play golf with, but I would be curious in 30 years
whether that still matters.
If it's more like who's in your, like online, who's in your online community kind of thing.
I think I think the signaling of college, like they are devaluing their own signaling. Pretty effectively. Maybe not fast enough for us to see a change like that tomorrow, or even in a generation. But I think ultimately that seems like that's where they're going. If people can't reliably count on that as a signal, and they're looking for other things anyway, So a high school kid might think reasonably that, in fact, college isn't going to mean that much. I have to do something else. I have to start a business or something,
or learn a
to
trade,
prove myself, or show myself as competent in some other way. Even start having, internships sooner, in high school.
I think there's too much school generally. And I actually know a lot of parents who would be really happy if their kids learned a trade.
I wish I hadn't gone to college.
I know.
I wish I had the degree.
We've been over this. I don't believe you, but
I wish I had the degree. I wish I had the degree, but without.
You should have done an online university. You should have gone to Prager University.
Useful. It wasn't. I don't know what I learned. I don't know if it was useful at all.
You should have gone to the University of Phoenix. or Prager you. That would have been much more
one or
appropriate for
two.
somebody of your abilities and extreme
Prager you,
self.
really?
Prager you, yeah.
For my abilities, that's a good match, Megan.
Because you're so
Excuse me.
you're so
I was in the
many
gifted
abilities.
program. Did you hear me earlier?
I know. You're saying that Dennis Prager University doesn't have a gifted and talented program?
What does?
I mean,
their
lacrosse team is amazing.
It's not a real university. What? So this is another total tangent. But I think that to some degree, Harvard is going to it's going to turn into, a signifier of elite, of a kind of an older elite.
Yes, it's an old money.
People.
It's an old money signifier.
Money thing. Yeah,
yes, it's like having an old beat up Volvo.
It is. Like lacrosse, right? Or rugby or whatever, whichever
things that are just not necessary, like the gentleman's hobbies.
Right.
Yes, no, going to Harvard will be like, having a old house on Cape Cod, by the sea, and your old beat up Volvo and your old money. And a lot of those people, like with old money, there's no money anymore. Like they're so rich that they are now broke. There's
what
a
does
lot
that
of people
mean?
like that. Well, people from really old money families, sometimes that money runs out after many generations.
Okay, well,
and then they're just coasting on the. Oh, I know. Yeah, I know people who've gone to Harvard and are now really just kind of struggling as
writers?
I mean, people older than me.
Okay,
but yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard. I feel really. Those people are marginalized.
Yeah, I feel like if I would have found a way to, even if I had gotten into a school like Harvard, to still be poor. I think.
I'm really good at being poor. I can find a way to be poor no matter what.
Exactly. Right.
You could hand me $1 million.
Exactly.
And, actually, we shouldn't say that.
And then we would have just just hand us $1 million, please.
We will invest it very wisely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of which, we need to tell people.
Speaking of which, yes, housekeeping before we move on to our next segment. Although we've been talking a long time.
I know, but this is gonna be worth it. We're gonna move on to Unfuckable Hate Nerds momentarily.
Housekeeping. Please subscribe to get to the bonus segment, which is going to be at the very end, like the long episodes, every single episode. You really want to subscribe. Go to a special place.substack.com. That is where you can subscribe. It's $6 a month. So cheap.
Oh my God.
Cheap too cheap for so much entertainment. And you get access to our commentary community that is really awesome, really fun, really smart.
High IQ people. We actually have an IQ test.
We have an IQ test. It's a blood test.
They actually, no, it's a saliva test. They spit into a tube and then they send it to us. And then we have it analyzed, possibly by Razib. And then we decide if we're going to let you in. He's
gonna write some comments about all this because he's
already in
our no. He's in our comments and he is saying he says all kinds of stuff. Anyway, but he'll be there telling us exactly why that's stupid. Razib, we know it's stupid. Okay.
I mean, you say that like it's a negative thing. Okay. So and if you are a founding member, you can have a chat with us on Zoom.
Yeah. If you give us the big bucks, the real big bucks, you can have access to our beautiful faces every once in a while.
We had a great one recently and we talked all about Sarah's internal monologue or lack thereof.
Yeah, it was just on one topic. Sometimes that happens. I mean, sometimes there's many topics and sometimes it's just everyone has a lot to say about that one topic. So we just had this discussion of what a weirdo I am for not having an internal monologue, but also just what it means and what meditation has to do with it, what your sense of self has to do with it, how it might impact all different kinds of ways that you perceive the world and other people, and whether it means anything about you.
And we learned that you don't even have music in your head. You don't even
have
what that even you don't means. Even have.
What do you mean?
Earworms.
I can imagine a song, yes, but I don't even have
you don't have ringworm or earworms
or or any of the worms
or heartworm
or heartworm.
That was very.
Do humans have heartworms? It's a dog thing. It's a horse thing.
It's an
I don't
it's
know.
an animal.
It's an animal thing.
You can
Okay.
take ivermectin for it, I believe.
Okay. Well, I'm already taking it, so
Okay.
I've been taking it for years.
No, I can tell. That's why your hair is amazing. Okay, so we're having another founding members chat on July 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
So
if you want to do it, if you want to
Come to
join and
that.
have a conversation, join us on our little happy hours. Every quarter or so, we have one. We try to.
Yeah.
And they're super fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do that by becoming a founder, and that really helps us too, because we can use this to invest in the podcast. And give you all this amazing commentary. Anyway, okay, all right.
Make it even better. Is there anything else? I'm teaching a personal essay and memoir class on Zoom, a writing class in the fall for 6 weeks. It doesn't have anything to do with this.
I'm still kicked out.
I mean, you're opposed to narrative.
That's true.
And story. So
only internal story.
I'm gonna teach a writing class for Sarah's internal monologue. Now this is a class for intermediate to advanced writers of memoir and personal essay. It's going to run 6 consecutive Wednesdays from September 6th to October 11th. And so you can go to my Substack and find out about that and apply.
Yes, you should apply. And I think that sounds like a really fun course.
It's super fun.
Yeah, if I had any stories to tell, I would definitely learn.
And everybody gets to have instead of like marking up your piece, everybody gets to have a personal private conference with me, Zoom conference at some point during the
then
class.
I am signing up.
Yeah, that's what you need is more
FaceTime.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to pay to do it. I'm going to pay to get more.
You should pay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So there was a very interesting piece in Tablet that you wanted to talk about, and I agree it's worth talking about.
Well, I found, and I thought it was interesting. It had a great spicy little title.
Yep.
Unfuckable Hate Nerds is the title.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say that on are we going to get bleeped on YouTube?
No, I hope so.
I always think that sounds better. Little beep,
Yeah, no.
It makes you sound naughtier. I like that.
Hate nerds. Yes, young men are losers. They deserve sympathy, not contempt. So this is a piece by William Deresiewicz, who has been a guest on my podcast 3 times now. He was just on a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was only on once.
I know. Well, you gotta do the work. What can I say?
Geeked up.
So yeah, this is a piece that's very much in line with a lot of the stuff we talk about in terms of like this hypergamy idea and the way women are soaring ahead of men and kind of leaving this cohort of very disenfranchised, angry, much maligned young men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he opens up the piece by quoting Mark Maron, the podcaster. Do you ever listen to Mark Maron?
I only know of him from that show Glow.
Okay. Well, Mark Maron has, I really like, right. Yeah. He's a comedian, and he had his own show called Maron, which was like a sort of in the Louis vein, like a show about his life, which was great. I loved it. Mm-hmm. He's very affable, and he's in his podcast. He was one of the first podcasters to do the long format interview. He did it out of his garage for years and years. He was he was doing this like 12 years ago at least. Anyway, Mark Maron has I don't listen to him as much as I used to, because he just tends to sort of like toe the social justice line a little bit more than you would think, and he is one of these guys who likes to talk about other men as being sort of misogynist. So this piece opens up: the army of unfuckable hate nerds, Mark Maron's term for the massive young men who pollute the internet with their misogyny. And so Maron says they play video games all day long, then they watch MMA, then they spend the evening jerking off to porn, then they put a few hours into attacking women online.
Sounds like my afternoon.
Yeah,
my everyday.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of jerking off to porn. So Yeah, I mean, I really don't like this kind of this just sort of like very reactionary, reflexive, just dumb dismissal of men. It's very it's just boring to me at this point, but it's so much in the air that we breathe
Yeah.
that people don't think about it.
It does. It does feel like picking on. I mean, and that's what this piece sort of tries to convey, that these guys are, that they need to be understood, that they need to be pitied to some degree. They need to have a certain level of societal sympathy geared towards them. I think I agree with that. But I honestly, I have a really hard time putting myself in the shoes of that kind of person. And to some degree, I just have to say that I don't understand male sexuality. I understand it clinically. I understand it in a, in a academic sense. I don't.
You mean how things actually work?
I'm
Is that
book,
you're saying,
yeah, I'm book learned on male sexuality, but I just don't know anything. I don't intuitively understand the way they feel about things. I don't have an easy time empathizing with the experience. So I have to, when I talk to my male friends, I have to sort of run a little, script in my head that's saying that when we're talking about sex or girls or romance, I have to remind myself that, they're different and they look at sex in a very different way. It means something very different to them. And they take the lack of it as evidence of something that it would never occur to me to think about. I wonder if that's part of the lack of cultural sympathy, because so many women just can't think of, they can't empathize with a 17-year-old that is a virgin and feels like the internet has told him that's a terrible thing, even though a lot of people are virgins at that age, but he doesn't know that. And he feels like a loser and he doesn't know how to talk to girls. He's so intimidated by them and he's like horny all the time. I think that's not an experience that a 17-year-old girl, like, you can't look back on your life and think that I had that experience.
And women have been told that men automatically have it easier than they do. And so therefore anything that a man goes through that it's difficult or that he's voicing complaints about is just male tears.
Yeah.
Look, this is what I always say. It's you're assuming that men automatically have more power and privilege than women, and then constantly making fun of them and talking about their tears and their toxicness and just what losers they are. We can get away with this. This is part of acceptable mainstream discourse because you're punching up. You are punching up at somebody who has more power than you if you are a woman being misandrist to men. But like, they actually don't have more power than us anymore most of the time. And so you're effectively handing them power by...
Young men certainly don't.
No.
I mean, but no, young men never have. That's the thing. Like, I don't know if has it ever been the case that a 17-year-old of any gender had much power?
Yeah,
and then,
I mean, I think before women were educated at the rates that they are.
Sure.
Like,
but like in the modern world and like, like, would you say that your dad as a 17-year-old was more powerful than your mom as a 17? I mean, weren't they both sort of screwed,
I think, because I think even at that time, it would have been assumed that men would, have a career and have an education, and that women were going to get married and at a pretty young age and have babies. Or if you're a woman, you were going to be a nurse, a teacher, or a nun,
right. So have it
I
hard
guess.
in that specific way.
So
but
I think
from the idea of like society hating you, I think young men also have to prove themselves. Like, it's not the case that we look upon a male person who achieves nothing as valuable just because they're male. I don't think that's true. I don't know if that's ever been true. I think it's male value has always been tied to how successful they are, proving themselves in the world and conquering things.
I mean, the online feminists would tell you differently. They would say men have always been valued by society. The world hates women. They will go through all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think what this point, what he's saying in this piece is that young men, other than a very small, there's the fortunate few, the born rich, the strikingly handsome, the 6'3", have much less social power than your just average woman. So, I'm curious what you think about this paragraph. So he says, any young woman who is even moderately attractive will be courted, complimented, paid attention to by women as well as men. Older men will buy them things. People will hang on their words, even when they aren't interesting, and laugh at their jokes, even when they aren't funny. They will have entry into places, private clubs, backstage after a show. Young men can only press their noses against. They will be able to advance professionally by batting their eyelashes at powerful men. Young men, meanwhile, those losers, those loners, those apes, are left to pick at their psychic zits on the periphery. This is a very, this piece was obviously written this is a very provocative piece. It's a departure.
I like
for,
it.
Yeah,
it's
a departure for Bill Deresiewicz. But I saw the response on Twitter, and it won't surprise you that people are now sort of just sweeping this into the manospheric repository.
You can't. There's no way to be sympathetic to men online and not get just totally destroyed. Especially if you say what he did, which is young women have it okay. Actually, especially if you're attractive, you have it okay. What he should have done is not said that thing. He should have said young women have it hard too in different ways. You have to acknowledge.
I think he does. I think he does do that.
I mean, he couldn't. Making that comparison is what makes the feminists mad. Like they want to be victim number one still, and so you can't say, actually, I'm a bigger victim than you sometimes. They're okay with acknowledging difficulties in the life of a young man. They're not okay with saying that guy actually is the real victim in his social context.
I mean, it's funny because I have a conversation about this next week on The Unspeakable with Lucinda Rosenfeld, who wrote the piece that we talked about in the New Yorker about having the affair with her college professor back in 1990. And, we talk about something that comes up a lot in this piece, which is the assumption that when we talk about young women, we're talking about very attractive women. So I guess I don't know if I'm picking a bone exactly in this piece, but I do think that I think a lot of people assume that even the ugliest woman can get laid very easily.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's true. Yeah. And in fact, if an ugly woman is going to get laid very easily, that's almost certainly going to be a very bad situation.
Yes.
For her.
Yes. I agree. I think it's interesting that people just see beautiful women or moderately attractive women, and that's it. And
you're not noticing all the other ones.
Yes, well, what about invisible. All the other? They're truly invisible, not hated. We don't. I don't think we hate homely young girls, but we definitely just don't. We don't see them when we don't consider their pain as relevant or worthy of discussion either. It's always the attractive women and their power. And that's actually my bone with a lot of these manosphere art. I mean, there's a lot that's wrong with many of them because it's not that that's what's happening here, but so much of it is just like written out of a sense of grievance, and sometimes that can be a grievance that's totally worth discussing, and sometimes it's grievance plus hate plus a lot of other psychological problems going on. But I've noticed that the online guys when they talk about women, they're almost always talking about attractive women.
No, they're talking about women that they want to sleep with.
Right.
That's
so much. They say women, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, attractive women, actually. That's only true of attractive women. I think when we talk about women, we're talking about all women. We're talking about, we see everybody. We see them all.
Yeah, we don't see attractiveness or unattractiveness.
No.
We're attractiveness blind.
Yes. But these guys are not, and that's very interesting to me. It's really telling because that's who they are looking at. They can't help but talk about women as if it's mostly attractive women because they don't even see, they don't even notice. Right.
And this is the thing, how much of this is a function of dating apps? Because I mean, the whole hypergamy thing is that now, well, part of it anyway, is that now that women don't rely on men for economic survival, they can support themselves, they can live on their own, they can have babies by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have this sort of automatic population of like, average looking kind of mediocre women to be paired with the mediocre men.
Mm-hmm.
Like it used to be that, not everybody could find a mate easily, but it was certainly much more, it was just kind of straightforward. Like you met somebody at church, or like you were set up with somebody.
It was something you needed to do as a woman. It was something you needed to find a man as a woman. Historically, that's been the function of marriage, has been not to, I mean, again, feminists are so wrong on this point, that I actually, this one really gets on my nerves, that obviously marriage exists to tie men down to the woman and to the family. Like, obviously, of course, because nature has already screwed us over
to protect
really bad.
to protect the offspring.
To protect the offspring, to be able to provide for the offspring while the woman is like basically incapacitated, like she's pregnant, she cannot provide. But she's also in danger, and I'm talking way back, like how the institution of marriage developed. Without marriage, you have young women who are vulnerable.
Pair mating. I mean, like marriage wasn't going on.
What has turned into marriage, what we now call marriage, but it existed in various forms, like even in like more ancient civilizations, you had something like this.
But it wasn't always romantic. The romantic component.
No. The romantic is new. The romantic is entirely new.
Bonding is new. Yeah.
It was always nice if it existed, but it was not required, not necessary. It was a truly inclusive institution, and that you could be gay and be forced into a marriage by your parents. That is true of the straight guy as well as the gay guy.
Back then.
But but it is the case that women needed marriage. They needed it to really survive and thrive in their environments, and so the community wanted marriage because they didn't. It's not great to have a bunch of fatherless children who are who don't have anyone to provide for them because a mother cannot provide for them. It's just like there are a lot of bad things that happen. So marriage made sense, and marriage was a way to tie men down to the family, to the woman, to one woman, and to the family, and tie his resources down as well. Now that women don't need it. Now that women can survive and thrive without marriage, now that they can be mothers and they can provide for their children without a man in their life, they're not pursuing marriage in the same way that they were pursuing it before. They're pursuing it for different reasons. They want status, they want romance, they want or love at least. I mean,
they're still pursuing it for some of the same reasons. It's not totally different, but
some of the same reasons. But I think.
Yeah, it's not a life or death situation. It's not a matter of survival anymore.
Not at all. Right. Not at all. And you can actually have a good life, maybe not the most fantastic life, but you can still have a good life as,
yes,
working in some business somewhere
it's
and
possible.
having you have friends, you have,
yes,
I'm not talking, you have an amazing life, but I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Look,
about.
I mean, there's a lot of bad marriages out there. A lot of people have a much better life on their own, as opposed to being married.
Sure, but what happens when women say no to marriage? Like when women say no to pair bonding, you have this indirect consequence of men not having access to sex in greater quantities than before, and feeling like maybe they never will, right? Like so. You're 17 and you're an unfuckable hate nerd. Okay, you think that when I'm 21, when I'm 25, I'll find somebody. I'll find someone.
No, when they're 45, they'll find somebody. I mean, this is the thing. It's like
no, I meant way back. When,
oh, right.
Way back when you would. Now, like you'll find somebody in high school or in college. You'll find somebody. Now you might never, right? Even 40 or maybe never.
Well, this is right. I mean, and the thing is, you're talking about these power differentials. So, like the logic would be an attractive 25-year-old, as we'll talk about in the bonus, some would say she is at the peak of her power. Like a beautiful young woman has more power, certainly, than even an attractive young man of her own age. she's going to lose as she gets older. She's going to lose that power. But the unattractive young man he has the chance to gain power. He's going to gain status. He's going to make more money. He's going to be much more eligible as an older person.
Yeah.
So I think that people sort of forget that it's like women get it. They've got their power early and then it goes away. And men have are lacking a great deal of power when they are younger. And I feel like that's the thing that nobody talks about. And
nobody
that's what
talks
this piece is about.
The power differentials are intense, I think, with young women and young men. But again, yeah, you're right. That's not what people talk about. Instead, it's like how this creepy guy pressured this one girl.
Yeah, and how older men are taking advantage of younger women by dating them. And that's creepy. Well, the younger women are dating those older men for a reason. Mm-hmm. Because the older men are offering them something that men their own age just simply cannot.
Yeah. And who's coming forward to the young man to offer him anything? To the
Jordan Peterson.
To the hate nerd, right? Exactly. Like, I think, but it's interesting too to see how the two different experiences can, play into the different politics that we as different sexes take on or are inclined towards. Like you as a young man, there's a grievance sort of mindset. Like I don't, everybody hates me. I hate the world. The kinds of the hate nerds that this guy is talking about. I don't think that's true all the time, but there's a sense of truly being disempowered, also despised by society, recognizing that you have to make money. You're valued for this and this and this, like, and explicitly being told this sometimes, that this is your value and this is your worth, and without it, you're worthless. Without it, you are where, this is where you are and this is where you will remain. And, even if you're 45 and you've achieved everything, you are married, you're happy, whatever. I think those formative experiences, those times when you were, from 17 to 25 or whatever, when you couldn't get a woman to look at you and you were angry, I think that they help you understand your world and form your politics, Oh,
I thought you were going to say they scar you for life and that you're still bitter forever.
I bet they still, even if you're not bitter, I bet they just give you a different understanding of the way things are, and how they should, and consequently how they should be.
What it's like to be down, as opposed to like beautiful women who age. I think that takes them a while.
Very different. Yeah,
they have an entitlement that it takes a long time for them to be disabused of.
So, have you felt that as you like
as I lose my extreme beauty?
Yeah. But have you known like women that you would like when they were younger would be very beautiful, and as they age, and have you do you have any experiences of seeing a woman with entitlement become less entitled as you go? Have you seen that transition?
Yeah,
I'm at that point where I'm starting to see it, but I'm not quite seeing it.
I mean, I don't. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I know anybody too well who was just like all about their looks. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, you were in a different circle.
Yeah, I didn't hang around with a lot of supermodels, but I mean, certainly. I mean, that was the thing about, this is a little bit of a side point, but not entirely. Like, when I was in New York City, in these like media circles and publishing, it's such a female dominated world. I mean, New York City has more single women than single men by like a lot. I was actually talking about this with Razib when I met him a couple of weeks ago in Austin. And, it's because of what kinds of businesses are there and what kinds of industries. And finance. The fact is that these finance guys, they tend to pair up young and move out of the city, like by the time they're in their early 30s. Mm-hmm. But like the women there would be incredibly smart and high achieving and also incredibly beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like they had it all.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of standard. And then, I would notice, so back in my time, you would definitely notice that these like guys who really couldn't measure up were with these incredible women. They were definitely punching above their weight. They were dating above their station. And a lot of them even admitted it. Now, that was before the digital era. That was before the dating apps. That was before all of this. And so I think that has been a radical change because those women don't have to just, their dating pool is so much bigger. They don't have to settle for like, you know, the guy they know from work who is like not really as smart as them. It's changed. So I don't think you had this bitter manosphere thing quite the way you have it now. I mean, it's always been there. There's always been guys with their mail order brides and stuff, but it wasn't like as much.
Well, there's just less sex happening at that age, you know, no, regardless of the reasons. Like the first, they used to have more sex because they were married, and then they used to have more sex because they were dating, and there was like an active sex life culture or whatever. And now they're having just a lot less sex in general. Maybe that I think maybe that seems to be improving. I read that somewhere.
Oh, people finally starting to have more sex. Yeah, because Trump, you know, because Trump is gone. You know, people with Trump who could have sex. Yeah. You couldn't even possibly.
I didn't.
You know, if you were a guy, you couldn't get it up. If you were a woman, you were just not in the mood. Yeah. You know, no way. So now that we have Biden, everybody's super turned on.
All right. On that note, let's time to move on to the bonus and say goodbye to these guys. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So stick around. We're gonna talk more about this.
Stick around to bonus peeps,
and the rest
and to everybody else.
Yeah. Thanks.
See you next week.